Hello, how's it going? How are you? You're good? I hope you're good, because if you're sitting down to watch this video, that means you're able, well, you're functioning, and you decided that you have a little bit of your time to watch my content. So thank you for that. Alright, you guys, so anyways, I got plenty to talk about, so please don't go anywhere. Okay, grab something to drink, a refresher, a smoothie, an ice cap, whatever, and then sit down and let's talk, let's chat. Jambo, karibu, welcome to my channel. My name is Chilanda and this is Library Without Borders. Okay, so you guys, in this video I will be talking to you about one book only. Before I even get into this book, let me tell you that I first started the month by reading this book. Because usually what I do, I read one physical book and then I'm listening to an audiobook on Audible. So that's what I was doing. But in terms of physical books, this book that I will be talking to you about was the first one that I started the month with. So I'll be talking about The Slave Ship by Marcus Whitaker. Oh boy, oh girl, oh man, oh woman. This book was brutal. It was hard to read. I should take a picture of me when I first introduce you the books that I'm excited to read about and how I look at the end of the month when I'm done reading those books, because it was bad. I have a headache right now, you guys. I have a headache. The way I'm going to be talking to you about this book, I have to really rely on my notes and then a lot of heavy quotes. And I am warning you guys, it's violent, it's brutal, it's horrible. So please watch your triggers. But before, again, I talk about the book, I want to say this, everyone. This book was written because it needs to be shared. As painful as it is to digest this book and realize that what happened to real people, we have to remember that we are now in a world where anything that is too much mental, we are able to take a step back and be like, you know what? I can't do this right now. And that's good. But you also have to remember that the people, the stories that you read, they didn't have the blessing that you have today to be like, you know what? This book, I can't handle it. So let me put it down. They went through what they went through and they couldn't even think of like, oh my gosh, this is too much. Can you please, Masa, can you please, give me a little break? I know everybody likes to say like, how do you do it? How do you read these heavy books? Because of what I just told you. As much as it was inconceivable, horrible, painful for me to read this, I had to be like, I have to get through this, because there are people who went through this physically, mentally, spiritually, who traversed all of this, and I'm here just reading about it. And yes, I can take a little break and be like, okay, for today maybe I can't, but tomorrow let me go back. And I feel like that's the least I could do as a human being, to read these stories and share it with everyone so that we do not forget, so that whatever we see happening today, we know where it's stemming from. And I'm about to tell you. So let's dive in. I've already spent 6 minutes and I have yet to speak about the books. Just so you know, this is Marcus Whitaker. I don't know. Take a good look at who he is. Yes. So he's a white man. And at times I want to understand, because they have to, we know how white people wrote stories, history. How can I say it? It was always to their advantage more than it was to the advantage of other groups or other races, right? So sometimes I wonder, when a white man tackles such a book, where does he come from? Is it from the guilt? Is it that he's trying to repay us by telling us our story? Where is he coming from? Maybe I didn't have the time to watch maybe his video, his interview. I'll probably do this later. I wonder. So I read this book. I tabbed this book, not because the sayings or the stories, it's because they're poignant parts that I'm gonna share with you, and my jaw dropped. I was crying. I was just like, how did people survive this? But even more, how there are human beings who actually committed what this book talked about. Okay, so without further ado, let me get through my notes, okay? So the first part of the book, the author shares the stories of different Africans that were taken from the continent. Like different stories individually of different individuals that were taken from the continent. So for example, in my notes here, I start with the story of Captain Tamba. He resisted the slave traders. He was sold to end up in Jamaica. That was one story. I don't know if it's the same man, but here I go on by saying there was a man and his family were all sold. His whole entire family were all sold. He tried to kill himself with his own fingers. And also I listened to the audible version of this book. So did you just hear what I said? He tried to kill himself with his own fingers. It's all in there, okay? I can't go into details, but that happened. That's how much this man did not want to be enslaved. Some enslaved people tried to starve themselves. So what would happen when that occurred? White people had speculum oris to force feed the enslavers. I think I'm gonna put a picture of that, okay? So, and then feed them. Another woman was named Sarah. She resisted and carried dances and songs. She was sold in Grenada. Most resistance took place on a ship called Nightingale, in which 8 men were tortured. One in particular was put into isolation. That man that was put into isolation was starved, tortured, and many horrifying things happened. And I believed he was let out after so many days that he was just barely hanging to life, like he was skeleton. You guys have to remember, these stories take place in a ship. Like the whole book is about the slaves, the enslaved people on different ships. Okay, Captain James Fraser was obviously a captain, and he was asked about the conditions of the enslaved people in the ships. And I wrote here that he lied. He lied about the conditions. And again, these are just notes, right? But you guys have to pick up the book to see what this Captain Fraser said. He actually tried to say that enslaved people were treated well, you know? And he said some things that were complete bullcrap. So before I move on, I just want to read you just a little passage, okay? This is right at the beginning. Over the almost 400 years of the slave trade, from the late 15th to the late 19th century, 12.4 million souls were loaded onto slave ships and carried through a middle passage across the Atlantic to hundreds of delivery points stretched over thousands of miles. Along the dreadful way, 1.8 million of them died. Their bodies cast overboard to the sharks that followed the ships. Most of the 10.66 million who survived were thrown into the bloody maw of a killing plantation system, which they would in turn resist in all ways imaginable. Many people captured in Africa died as they marched in bands and couples, human trains, to the slave ships. Although the lack of records makes it impossible to know their precise numbers, scholars now estimate that depending on time and place, some portion between a tenth and a half of the captives perished between the point of enslavement and the boarding of the slave ship. A conservative estimate of 15%, which would include those who died in transit and while being held in barracoons and factories on the coast, suggests another 1.8 million deaths in Africa. Another 15% or more, depending on region, 1.5 million would expire during the first year of laboring life in the New World. From stage to stage, expropriation in Africa, the Middle Passage, initial exploitation in America, roughly 5 million men, women, and children died. You guys, this is not me. This is a white man saying this. Correct? This isn't a black man. This is not African man. This is a white man. Another way to look at the loss of life would be to say that an estimated 14 million people were enslaved to produce a yield of 9 million longer surviving enslaved Atlantic workers. So here I say, more than half of the enslaved people came through Charleston, served as the entire distribution point for the lower South. There's a part where it says here in Bonny. I think Bonny was like another point of sale. Still, is it on the African continent? I think it's on the African continent. And I wrote here, sharks devoured the dead bodies of the Negroes. There's a part where when you couldn't carry yourself, you were sick, something, you were not functioning properly, they would just throw you in the shark. And there's a part where it says, because the shark had tasted human blood and human, flesh, they would know when the ships were, sailing off. And they would wait and follow them from point A to point B. Yes, y'all. Europeans did that to Africans. So he says here, 15th century, we know the Portuguese arrived in West Africa where they bought gold, ivory, and human beings. I know about that a little bit more because I talked about the enslavement of people of Angola, including Congo, through the book of Jinga, the princess Jinga. So here we talk about the evolution of the sailing ships. Let me just show you the Atlantic. There's a map here. I don't know if you can see. It says the Atlantic circa. You guys can see. I'm actually gonna have my husband put the video. I found this cool video show, and I want him to just put it on the side so you guys could just see the crossing of the ships being and the people being taken from Africa year after year after year after year. Right here, just right here. Put it here, babes. So I wanted to share this. I have quoted here. Britain played an important role in the early phases of the slave trade, chartering and subsidizing fossil waste owner-employer. I can't say that word. The Royal African Company, a trading monopoly in 1672. You guys, when I say this book chronicles the role of British in the slave trade, it baffles me now when I hear of Black British talking down on, African Americans or Black Americans. It's mind-boggling. The British were among the biggest slave traders, and here you are trying to talk down on Black Americans when you both have the same enemy. Wow. Let's go back to my notes. These ships. Yeah, the ships. So these early explorations marked the beginning of the Atlantic slave trade. They were made possible by a new evolution of the sailing ship. The full-rigged, three-masted carack, the forerunner of the vessels that would eventually carry Europeans to all parts of the earth, then carry millions of Europeans and Africans to the New World, and finally earn Thomas Gordon's admiration. So here, the seizure of new lands, the expropriation of millions of people and their redeployment in growing market-oriented sectors of the economy, the mining of the gold and silver, the cultivating of tobacco and sugar, the concomitant rise of long-distance commerce, and finally a planned accumulation of wealth and capital beyond anything the world had witnessed. The spread of sugar production in the 1650s unleashed a monstrous hunger for labor power. For the next 2 centuries, ship after ship disgorged its human cargo, originally in many places European indentured servants, and then vastly larger numbers of African slaves who were purchased by planters, assembled in large units of production, and forced under closed and violent supervision to mass produce commodities for the world market. So when you hear the descendants of these people tell you that they build the new world, please accept it, because it comes from this man, right? Because most of the people who like to deny that Black people build, America, or The rest of the world are usually white people. So I'm hoping that you can pick up this book and listen to your brother here. You see, that's a brother, a European brother, who tells you things, facts. And at the end of this book, he gives you all the books, notes, bibliographies, you know? So it's not that he just came with this. He's done extensive research, so you know what he's talking about, yeah? Okay. Rise of capitalism. So here I talked about the triangular trade. So European or American port with cargo goods to West Africa, where they trade for enslaved people, to America, where they traded for sugar, to tobacco and rice, right? So that's the triangle, and back. 4 million Africans had been traded off. And then here I wrote that during all of this, England is at war with France and Spain. Liverpool and Bristol were major ports. So the next pages, it talks about this guy called Joseph Monetis, this Joseph M. And basically he's giving instructions on how to build the next ship, you know, to contain more sardines that were the enslaved people. Because sardines referring to how they were stoked, right? Now I'm gonna put the picture here. It's here. So they say at some point the forests were depleted, so the timber rose. They needed alternatives. So pine was it, made by the enslaved to capture other enslaved, right? The wood that they needed to build these boats. So the forests were depleted, so they made pine. And who had to get those pines? Enslaved people, to go get more enslaved people. Yo, the cruelty is unmatched. And I'm not even in the juice of this. So of course he does talk about slavery that exists in these African societies. So again, something needs to be clarified, because there seems to be a lot of confusion amongst whites, blacks, really the entire world. When you have not read any other books but the books that were written by white people, especially when it comes to enslaved, you know, enslaved people in African societies, yeah, you're gonna believe them, right? But you have to understand, and that's what everybody like Dr. Umar and other researchers and other Pan-Africanists and other Africans will tell you, that yes, the system of slavery existed in our societies, but we treated our slaves as human beings. And sometimes we even married them. They were part of our family. That's the difference, right? But this, what Europeans did, it ain't it. So don't confuse. Yeah, this whole we sold our brothers and sisters and mothers and children. So he talks about different parts of West Africa. Senegambia, which today is called something else, was the longest slave trade in history. He talked about the spread of Islam out in the 9th century. Resistance to enslavement was fierce. 400,000 people were sold and sent to the New World, half to Britain and America. So my British people, when you go on social media, especially TikTok, and you want to insult African Americans, I beseech you to read this book. Read a little bit more of the history of England, UK, you know, of Britain and the slave trade. But until then, let me give you a little bit more information on how much British played in the slave trade. Sierra Leone and the Windward Coast, Gold Coast, were trading with Europeans since the 14th century. Asante people were powerful, yet due to the decreased interest in gold, they soon became involved in the slave trade. More than 1 million enslaved people were taken from the Gold Coast. 2/3 were carried off by British and American ships. Bight of Benin and Biafra were the point of most of where the people were taken. 1.4 million came from these regions. More than 1 million, mostly Igbo, many went to Virginia, 1730 to 1770, and the rest to the West Indies, West Central Africa, Bobangi, were fishermen and expanded into agriculture. Malebo Pool, which was also a trading port. So let me just read that part to you guys, because that name is very important, because I'm gonna tell you why. First of all, this is West Central Africa, and check the name there. Y'all see the name right there, right? And this is the map. Y'all see the map there. Okay, so let me read it to you. So it said 95. So West Central Africa consisted of a vast expanse of coast with two main slaving regions, Congo and Angola, and within them hundreds of cultural groups. It was one of the most important regions of trade as the 18th century wore on, and it became the single most significant in the 1790s. Slave ships called with increasing frequency along a coastline of some 1,200 miles, beginning around the island of Fernando Po and extending southward to Benguela and Cape Negro. By today's map, the area begins in Cameroon and extends southward to include Equatorial Guinea, Gabon, the Republic of the Congo, a small coastal bit of the Democratic Republic of Congo, and most of Angola. West Central Africa was historically a place of Portuguese colonization, and as I mentioned, if you guys had been on my channel, you all saw how I read about all of Portugal and all that stuff in Princess Ginga. Portuguese colonization and influence both on the coast and deep inland. In the 17th century, the influence included mass conversion to Christianity in the Kingdom of Congo, one of the main client states in the slave trade. British and American traders began to make inroads with lasting success in the middle of the 18th century. So here it says, many communities were organized along matrilineal lines, which again I had also talked about that in the book The History of African Art. I had discovered that the tribe in Congo was matrilineal. In the 18th century alone, more than 2.7 million slaves were delivered. They constituted 38% of the century's total, making West Central Africa the most important region of the slave trade by the considerable margin. Yo. So see, a little bit of Congo, people were taken. So I wanted to say something here. So here it talks about wars were raging in Africa long before the arrival of the Europeans, but so was the rest of the world. Europeans were fighting each other. We heard about Spain, France, and all of them, right? You know, these non-savages, right, weren't fighting. They were civilizing people. They were not killing each other. No. So he talks about corruption among African leaders. Okay. Resistance occurred often before and during and after arriving into the plantation. 2/3 were men, 1/3 were women, and 1/4 were children. And here I said all of those numbers left families, communities fractured. Okay, so before I go to the next point, again, I want to speak to the shared pain of Africans and Black American, especially African Americans and Caribbeans and Black British, okay? Sometimes I feel like there's this comparison between Black people whenever they talk to Africans about what they went through, as if when you guys were taken, I guess the rest of Africa was simply what? They were not broken? Or were they living in peace? Like, there's a shared pain here. Families were broken up. Whole villages, communities were pillaged. You went through all of that there, but Africans went through so much as well. So much. So for me, I'm not here to be like, yeah, like let's compare, but it's just like, let's stop that whole conversation that, yeah, we went through this, but you, no. There's a common factor here. Let's focus on that common factor and the consequences. So Grand Pillage, surprised organized raid on villages. Again, there's many examples of how these looked like, you know. Can you imagine you're in a village, you're sleeping, and then bam, that fateful day. Can you just try to visualize that fateful day of a child walking, just playing, and boom, taken, to never see their family, never, and to be brought in such horrid conditions. And if you make it, only to go suffer on plantations, never to have break for years. Oh, you guys, when I see this book, I was in the shower, I was crying. I was just like, so when I read things like this, and y'all saw me read a little bit about Christianity and how Christianity was brought to Africans, and you want me to be like, God is good all the time, God is good, yeah? Because what does the Bible say? Let me just diverge a little. Doesn't the Bible say that where there's one or two and they assemble in my name? Sorry, I've read my Bible in French, so I'm basically not translating it properly, but I think for you guys who read the Bible, you get the gist of which verse I'm talking about. But where there's one or two and they're gathered in my name, whatever they ask shall be, I guess, given. Do you think in the 400 years, those Christians that were finally violently converted did not get together to ask God, please spare my children, spare my wife, spare my family, spare my village? There were not like maybe 2, 3 black people that asked to be spared. So was it given to them? Was peace? Were they spared the atrocities that continued? Yet that's what the Bible said. That's what Christianity tells us. That whatever we ask, and don't tell me, oh, maybe they're hard, maybe they were not really believing. So you want to tell me, out of these millions of people that were converted, there was not one man, one person that believed, or 2 truly believed in the sense of believing? And yet, didn't they cry loud enough? Didn't they convert so fast, so long as this Jesus that they were being taught could finally save them? No? Just saying. That's just my take on Christianity. Again, no, this is no shade to Christians. I'm just saying, you want to tell me, because I read, right? History. I don't just, and this is what I'm interpreting, right? Okay. So let's move on, guys. He talked about the point of no return. That's where the phrase of point of no return. And then there's a part where he talks about James Stanfield, and the floating dungeon. Page 155. So here it says, next came Human Guinea Captain, the keeper of the floating dungeon, a torturer, rapist, and killer. He was variously barbarous, tyrannical, fiendish, despotic, and at the deepest level, demonic. That's not me who's saying that. It's right here. It's right here. Your European brother is the one writing this. Not us. Him. That's what he thinks of one of his brother. Not us. He possessed the dark power of savage rigor. It continues with the cruelty. Yeah. So most of this account recounts the experiences of both enslaved people and sailors. Whipping, rape of a 9-year-old, the cries of enslaved. Stanfield was conscious of the sounds of the slave ship, the long groan, strain of anguish, cries, death songs, shrieks of woe, and howlings of despair. All in this instance were heard in the midnight hour. Sickness was a big part of the experience. Breathing infected air amid green contagion, the fevered lie strewed over the filthy deck. Stanfield followed abolitionist surgeon Alexander Falconbridge in saying that the slave ship was like a slaughterhouse, blood, filth, misery, and disease. Sometimes I had to read some of these passages and I had to literally tell myself to be like, just close your heart and read this as like completely detach my emotions for me to get through some scenes. I had to do it, you guys, because I wouldn't. Woo, you guys. It's so sorry. It took me so long before I could compose myself and be ready to talk about this book. And I thought today, if I talk to you about it, I would have cried on my emotions. I would have, here I am. Woo! Okay, let's keep going. Yeah, this was just page 150. John Newton and the Peaceful Kingdom Slaver. Yeah, here he just talks about building a ship, how they furnish the ship and all and stuff. Crew members died, were buried. Africans were called by numbers and threw overboard when dead. I think I mentioned that. So y'all heard, right? The crew members, they were buried, but Africans were just thrown overboard into sharks infested waters. Religious mandatory prayers, they prayed. These Christians, they were Christians. Yes, can we just stand on that? These beautiful human beings that God created were Christians. The ones who committed the worst possible injustice, cruel things were Christians. Can we just say it? Am I saying a fact? Okay. Mortality rate was high. Apparently, Amazing Grace was written by who? Let me see. That's on that. Okay. Because I say he wrote Amazing Grace. They used other slaves to subdue the rest in slave ship. Y'all know, right? And that system was brought into plantations where you had other black people who will tell on other black people.
Django here is a freeman. This nigga here, that nigga there.
They took women in their personal quarters, were replaceable, incentives were given. Hi. Please, if you tell me that this other man is trying to set himself free, come tell me and I'll give you 5 minutes of fresh air. Okay. The Speculo Loris, when enslaved, didn't want to eat. I read about that. There were public punishments, tormentor, sexual torture. So let's go to page 218. You guys, I'm sparing. Even the things I'm reading to you, I'm sparing you guys. Oh boy, how am I sparing you? So, for the enslaved, of course, the terror was much more pervasive. Captains unleashed sexual terror on women captives. For men, the terror was equally great, although different in its methods. Newton saw unmerciful whippings continued till the poor creatures have not had power to groan under their misery, and hardly a sign of life had remained. He saw the enslaved agonizing for hours and indeed days in thumbscrews. He knew one captain who studied with no small attention how to make death as excruciating as possible. Yes, you heard correctly from another white brother. Let's keep going, y'all. I think that's the last that I took. Yeah, we're almost coming at the end of my notes. Thumbscrews, another torture tool. Seamen and sailors, refugees, orphanages, jails, middle class families. So what I meant by that is that most of these sailors or seamen people were refugees, they were coming from orphanages, or they were jailed, or middle class families. So they had no means of, living in high society. So they went and sailed and committed what they committed. Some people who belonged to parents who actually owned these ships were bred. They were bred for it at a young age. Yep, you saw kids, 400 centuries, right? Kids who lived in that line of enslavers call it the slave trade. Ready money was offered to entice sailors who made up the slavers. So page 229, what happened here? What the slave trade offered above all else was ready money, an advance of 2-3 months' wages. This was the key to enticing sailors to join a trade they did not like. A common sailor could get €4, to 6 euros sterling in 1760, which by today's standards would have been between 1,000 and 1,500, a considerable sum of money for a poor person, especially if times were hard and he had a family to feed. What I realized is that Marcus tried to humanize these sailors. There's a whole chapter where he talks about sailors, white sailors, and how they were themselves treated badly. I couldn't care less. I am telling you straight. I read those parts and my emotions were like, okay. Next. The cruelty of the captain and the crew knew no bounds, no limit. Listen to this part. If the slaves died a natural death, it would be the loss of the owners of the ship. But if they were thrown alive into the sea, it would be the loss of the underwriters who had ensured the voyage. Some members of the crew, including mate James Kelso, objected, but Collingwood prevailed, and that evening the crew threw 54 slaves, hands bound, overboard. Yes, you heard correctly. You heard correctly. Because it threw another 42 over the side 2 days later, and 26 more soon after. 10 of the enslaved watched the hideous spectacle and jumped overboard of their own volition, committing suicide and bringing the number of deaths to 130 on one ship. Let's just read this part here. When the women and girls are taken on board a ship, naked, trembling, terrified, perhaps almost exhausted with cold, fatigue, and hunger, they are often exposed to wanton rudeness of white savages. The poor creatures cannot understand the language they hear. Can you believe it? But the looks and manners of the speakers are sufficiently intelligible. In imagination, the prey is divided upon the spot and only reserved until opportunity offers, where resistance or refusal would be utterly in vain. Even the solicitation of consent is seldom thought of. I like this part. Oh, Riddicker. Here he says, perhaps he and other abolitionists considered it too delicate a subject for public discussion, or perhaps they shield away because it conflicted with their desire to make the British sailor a victim of the slave trade and an object of popular sympathy. It would not do to depict him as a white savage, a sexual predator, a serial rapist. Yet that is what some slave trade sailors were. Unrestricted access to African women's bodies. So I wrote here, seamen died, disease, mistreatment from the captain. Next, mutiny and desertion. Next, horsewhip, a tool to torture. You guys, y'all know what a horsewhip look like? Take a look. Process of stripping people of their identity. Let me just show you, before I go to page 267, I want to show you some pictures. These are your historical figures. All right. To all lovely white people today, these are your ancestors. Right? These are ships. You can just imagine the glare, sorry, but you have to look. These are the sharks that were eating our African people. This is not a cartoon. This is not made up. This is real. So the evolution of the ships, y'all can see here, and these are maybe slave people and seamen and sailors and whatnot. Okay, you have, and these are the tools being used for our dear Africans by our lovely Christian enslavers. So these are main slave trading ports. That's what it says here. Slaving trading regions of Africa. This was in Guinea, right there. Okay, here, no, there's more. Y'all can just see the people right there. Check up there. Check these. If you guys see this. Okay. Okeano. I have yet to read his story, but these are John Newton and James Field. Yes, here you have the famous, what is it, horsewhip, the tools used. Survived. Just another picture. Yes, please look. Oh, this is lovely, just lovely. These were how our Africans were treated. This is what they're going to tell you. Yes, you Africans did the same thing. This is how we treated our African people. Of course. Slave ship here. There's more, y'all. So let's go to page 267. I tabbed and I want to see what that one was about. So here, the process of stripping began under threat of violence from both the black traders and the white traders with clothes. It soon extended to name, identity, and to some extent culture, or so to the new captors hoped. Various merchants and captains gave the official reason for removing clothes to preserve their health. That is, to reduce the likelihood of vermin and disease. Some of the women, when stripped, immediately squatted to hide their genitals. Some unknown number of ship captain gave women a small square of fabric to wear around their waist. Europeans had long justified the trade and slavery more broadly by saying that Africans were savage men-eaters who must be civilized by exposure to the more advanced life and thought of Christian Europe. I am not making this stuff up, y'all. It's right here. Read it for yourself. So do not be outraged when I'm saying by our fellow white Christians they were Christians, and you saw that they explained what they did to Africans as normal under Christianity. So please, people, like, sometimes I feel like I'll be talking about this and today's Christians, including the black people, the white man did a number on you, but it's over, it's done with. They want to be shocked. Why are you shocked? These are facts told by a white man. Branding of enslaved people, numbering of the enslaved people. When enslaved needed to respond to nature, you guys know what they did? Obviously, right there and then they were cuffled. Sardines. They defecated there, did everything there. Women with their period and blood and defecation and everything right there. That's how our Christian brothers treated their Africans slaves or human cargo. I don't know. Difference of language and tribe. So they did everything to make sure that whenever they take a slave from, I don't know, from this part, this Igbo or Fante or different tribe, they made sure that they mix so they wouldn't understand each other, so that they would not be able to, come up with a plan of escape. So they couldn't communicate. Fighting among enslaved people. Well, yeah, you guys are chained together for days, hours, months. Proximity. You don't know each other. You're going through the hardest shit that no human beings are supposed to go through. So yes, fighting is bound to happen among you guys. You're sleeping, but then somebody has to go. You're sleeping in a place where you also, Africans attributed diseases to spirits. Yeah. Purposely mixed Africans to deter them from the telling of stories. So those are where my notes end, but I've tabbed everything. I wanted to show you, there's a part I missed at the beginning where, you guys, there were descriptions given on what kind of enslaved people needed to be brought on the ship. Okay, here. This I need to tell you guys. He instructed his captains to buy slaves between the ages of 12 and 25, 2 males to a female, good and healthy, and not blind, lame, or blemished. He no doubt followed the advice of his Jamaican factors about the defects to be carefully avoided. Please listen carefully. Dwarfish or gigantic size, which are equally disagreeable, ugly faces, long tripyish breasts, which ye Spaniards mortally hate, yellowish skins, livid spots in ye skin, which turns to an incurable evil, films in ye eyes, loss of fingers, toes, or teeth, nivels sticking out, ruptures which your Gambia slaves are very subject to, bandy legs, sharp shins, lunatics, idiots, lethargists. I highlighted here. It says here, you guys, and it goes up to there, but if you want to read it yourselves. So yeah, I have to conclude this, you guys. London, Liverpool, and Bristol in England, in Boston, New York, and Philadelphia in the United States. Those were the home ports for the slave trade. Did I say London, Liverpool, and Bristol in England? Because again, Black British, if you're here, need you to read on this, right? So that we can stop disrespecting and making abrasive comments towards one another. Okay, you guys, at the end he talks about when the whole abolition happened, and I think there's a part where he talked about the value. I want to read this, so yes, this is the part, you guys, and then I'm gonna end this. By the time Great Britain and the United States abolished the slave trade in 1807, what had the slave ship route? It had already carried 9 million people out of Africa to the New World. Another 3 million were yet to come. British and American slave ships alone had carried 3 million during the long 18th century. The human costs of the traffic were staggering. Around 5 million died in Africa on the ships and in the first year of labor in the New World. For the period 1700 to 1808, some 500,000 perished on the way to the ships. These are not things, and these are human beings. These are Africans. Another 400,000 on board, and yet another 250,000 or so not long after the ships docked. By the time of abolition, roughly 3.3 million slaves were working in the Atlantic plantation complex for American, British, Danish, Dutch, French, Portuguese, and Spanish masters. Approximately 1.2 million of these labored in the United States, another 700,000 in the British Caribbean colonies. So when you hear Black people say they're bailed, can we now stop and try to say that is not so? Because again, we have a fellow white brother here who is telling you facts, okay? Facts. In 1807 alone, Britain, for all my Black British here, listen to this. In 1807 alone, Britain imported for domestic consumption 297.9 million pounds of sugar and 3.77 million gallons of rum, all of it slave produced, as well as 16.4 million pounds of tobacco and 72.74 million pounds of cotton, all of it slave produced. In 1810, the enslaved population of the United States produced 93 million pounds of cotton and most of 84 million pounds of tobacco. They were themselves, as property, worth 316 million. Robin Blackburn has estimated that by 1800, the slave-based production of the New World had cost the slaves is this million or is it billion? To something out. Let me just show you the numbers, okay? Just right there. The numbers is too much for me. This is right here. You see the numbers? Right there, right? That number, production of toil and sold for a gross sum that could not have been much less than 35 million, 3.3 billion in 2007 dollars. Billion, y'all. So what have we learned today? A lot, huh? So yeah, you can just imagine that I had a lot of rage, anger, sadness, and maybe other emotions that do not exist. I think so. I went through all of it. Even emotions that do not exist. I went through it. And I had to remind myself that certain white people fear revenge of black people. I want to tell you that it just wouldn't work, because the people who deserve to die 1,000 deaths are already gone. So the descendants, you guys are profiting, yes, but there's nothing. There's nothing that I feel like as Africans, as black people, we could be there and be like, I want revenge. I don't think so. No. But one thing I want to say is that all of this has opened up my eyes to how white people truly have done a number on Africans. And today, you guys follow the news, right? You guys have heard me talk about Congo and the United States, the mineral deals that are being discussed and apparently is going to be finalized by the end of this month, which you guys have heard me say that I'm not with it, because I want to tell you, 400 years of enslavement, add how many years of colonization, all of this at the hands of white people, and 60 years of independence from them. You think that all of that just gonna disappeared and it's just a simple mere racism that exists? I don't know, y'all. You have made it clear that you guys don't like a people based on their skin, and yet, as history shows, you have taken people from that same continent that today you guys won't leave alone. Y'all have seen everything that's going on with the Captain Ibrahim Traoré movement. I've spoken about that I've posted some of that stuff on my Instagram, on my TikTok. He said, thanks to Trump, that, Africans, we're what we are, blah, 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 poor, everything you guys have said about Africa. So Mr. Captain Traoré said, okay, leave. Please leave. Go on. We're going to deal with our stuff. And all of a sudden, France, precisely, is like, no, I don't understand. Leave that dirty continent with its dirty people talking about the black race alone. I don't understand. Until today, the people, the Christian who did what they did, raped, killed, murdered, stole, violated, whipped, maimed, everything, are still in our continent, plundering our resources. Yes? Am I saying false things, or is this real? They're still there. They won't leave Africa alone. Now there's all these videos circulating about, oh my gosh, you guys have heard me say on this channel when I was talking about what's going on with Congo, the war that's happening in Congo right now because of our natural resources, the cobalt, the tin, that's, feeding your technology. You guys heard me say that a lot of us who live abroad now, especially the black diaspora, we've seen it all. We know the truth now. We see facts. Like, we know that we have a continent that is rich, that is beautiful. We know that the West needs Africa and not the other way around. And for us who are here, we would gladly go back home. It's simple. I've said that before. And I want to speak to my white allies, okay? It's simple. You guys want to have a white continent or whatever, okay? The Africans, most of us, we want to go back home because now we got lands there, we got all of it, but you guys have to talk to your government, put that pressure on them to be like, hey, just let them be, let them govern themselves. Stop pitting another country against the other country. Stop giving guns to this little country so that it can go and destabilize the other country and corrupt the government, and then everybody's gonna be, oh, Africans can deal with their own shit and blah blah blah. No, that's what we need you to do. Once you do that, then we do have shit. Africa still have things to work through. Trust me, The fact that we're still able to fight amongst ourselves means that we still have to get our shit together. But we can do that finally if you guys just stop meddling in our business. We will do that. We can finally deal with our own stuff at home. That's what I want you to say, to do, my white ally friends. Put pressure on your government to be, hey, you want to have white South Africans? You know, stop giving guns to Rwanda, you know, so that Congolese people can be at peace, and the rest of these Congolese in the United States can go back. We will go back. And apart from that, I just want to say that you guys know that Trump showed a picture of people who were being killed in Goma, which is the eastern part of Congo, which is my Congo, and he passed that picture as the genocide of white South Africa. You baffle me. You absolutely baffle me. There's no end to your manipulations. It's really crazy to me. So I need to conclude. I know this video is long, but I needed to do this so that when I talk about my wrap up, I can just, you know, speed through it. But lastly, there's a woman, I want to show her video here. I think she's somewhere in the UK. She talked about how colonization had some positive effects on Africans. How, my friend? Do you know the scramble of Africa? Do you know how many people died under Belgium when Belgium colonized Congo? They said 10 million, but there's more. That's what colonization did. Yeah, maimed people, arms cut off. That's what colonization. This is what I'm saying. My white allies, help us, because these kind of is absolutely, it really is not good for you. It's not good for you. And it's weird as well, because I realized that we live in a world where, you know how white people had the monopoly of hatred because they showed you that you are inferior, Azzy. You are inferior. You're nothing. You blah blah blah. You. We hate you, choo. But you understand how Africa today is now able to tell the imperialists to get the fuck out of its continent? Do you know how it has taken now a lot of nations to tell you that we need Africa for Africans? And that's what's baffling. Why don't you leave Africa? Like, it's so weird to me. You hate us. Leave us and our natural resources and our people, and you know, and you guys can have the West and everything you guys have, right? It's unbelievable to me. Absolutely unbelievable to me. Anyways, I think I have said everything I needed to say. There's many things that are going on, but I can't all tackle them in this video. But that was the slave ship, y'all. I recommend you read, especially to my African. This book has it's not part of schools in Africa. Imagine every African nation read this book, and every black person around the world read this book. And I'm not saying to read this so we can harbor hatred, but we need to remember who we're dealing with, because we seem to have forgotten that it took them, it was 400 years plus some whatever years of colonization, and we only had 6 years of, and you guys think that we're good, like we're friends now, we're happy, like, you know, we're like, you guys like us now. Like, nah. I can go on and on with this book and everything that's going on, but anyways, you guys, I have a headache. I think I have to end this video here. So anyways, you guys, I know this particular video is gonna be hard, but it's the world, it's life. It happens sometimes that I'm gonna have hard reads, you're gonna have hard reads, you know, and that's what I'm all about, you know. So I hope I brought a book. Even though it's hard, I encourage you guys to pick it up, and even white people, so that when you hear black people say that we build this country, we need reparations, you know, racism still exists, these things are not just in the past, they're still very much present in our societies. And you, descendant of, you need to be aware of it. For a woke society, it seems like there's some things that are being perpetuated from enslavement till today. Anyways, I want to end this video by saying to my black people around the world, I love you. I love you Africans. I love you blacks around the world. I love you. I love you. We've been through so much, but the ancestors are here. The ancestors are there, and I know that we're gonna be good. We're gonna prevail. We're gonna prevail. Anyways, you guys, that's it for me. Thank you. If you stayed to watch this video from beginning to middle to the end, I thank you so much. I appreciate you. And I would really appreciate if you can give me your thoughts. Like this video, I want to hear from you ladies and gents. Leave comments below. I wanna hear what you guys think of this book. If you're gonna pick it up, I know it's hard. And if you don't want to leave me any comments, leave me ships. Any kind of ships. Emoji ships. Leave me that in the comments. Okay, so thank you. I hope you like it. Please don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe, and your notification bell. And I will see you in my next video. Bye.